Welcome to Narratives Leadership Story Talks, where great leaders go beyond the bottom line to create lasting impact. Join hosts Jerome Deroy and Julienne Ryan as they uncover the stories behind real-world challenges, offering practical insights to help you lead with empathy, authenticity, and purpose. Each episode dives into how leaders use storytelling to build trust, foster connection, and inspire action. Whether you're navigating workplace dynamics, driving change, or building high-performing teams.
Everyone's just trying to do what they think is best for them. But in so doing, we wind up behaving in different ways because we are cultural beings. Once we become aware of the cultural influences that drive us, then we can begin to moderate our behavior in order to help each other achieve each other's goals, assuming we all have the best of intentions. And at that point, usually, if anybody doesn't have such good intentions, it will come out.
Welcome back, everybody, to Leadership Story Talks. That was Dean Foster, who I'm nicknaming the Culture Guy. But we've had quite a few people talk to us about cultural differences and that sort of thing. Pernilla Rorso comes to my mind, as well as Craig Foreman. And all these episodes you can go and check out on narrative.com/podcast. But I think it was the first time really that we had someone who first, wrote a book about all these cultural differences and how to work with these different cultures. And then he had so many anecdotes. You remember about, Brazil and Russia and all these different things. So really encourage everybody to go and check out that episode. But this quote that I pulled out, first of all, difficult to pull out a quote as it always is for these debriefs because there's so many great things that were said. But I felt like this was a good one because in terms of us building on that, because really it's quite true in my experience that, we're influenced by so many different things. And we don't always think about, the culture in which we were brought in. And to me, this resonates quite a bit because I grew up in France. My mother's American, my father's French. So, I spent a lot of time in the US. I've been in the US now for, more than 2 decades. And there are real cultural differences between those two countries. And so for me, I know that at a younger age, this was something to kind of wrestle with and grapple with. And the more I've noticed the things that actually influence me from each culture, the more I'm able to understand other people, interestingly. So not just myself and my behaviors, but also others and where they're coming from. So I really, to me, the lesson of this is, and what it's given me a kind of renewed hunger for, is to learn about other people's cultures and try to find out more and more. So where are you from? Like what influences you? And I think we do that in the podcast too. Now that I think about it,
we do.
When we ask about people's, experiences that shaped them, a lot of times they talk about their childhood. They talk about something that happened that's in the context of the culture they grew up in. So anyway, that was sort of my initial thoughts about this. What about you?
Well, couple of things. I mean, one of my go-to lines is, from growing up in New York and particularly in Queens, is how'd you get here? So it reveals so much. Secondly, I think this should be a mandatory class for everyone to learn about cultures and explore and see how different it is. It would open up so many possibilities of trust and listening and, on every level, professionally and professionally, I'm getting tongue tied because I'm so excited. Professionally and personally. So let me get the P words out first here, because he's worked from such a variety, not just European cultures or Asia, from Bedouins to different countries in South America and Africa, and every time he's traveled, he's come away with new lessons to share and teach others. How we present, who talks, who listens, what's important in these cultures. So yeah, I'm waxing poetic as well, just like you are about this episode. But yeah, there's a lot to be learned. And we can be curious. It's not that like we have to get on a plane all the time. We can just pay attention to what's in our heads and our hearts, how we present when we go to a store or when we see people working around us. What story are we putting in our head that we're projecting onto those individuals. And I think if we start with that, that's the beginning of recreating a story and how we navigate with our community and what stories we can start to share.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'm also reminded, it's just popped into my head now, of an episode we did with Heather Hansen, who talked about language
Mm,
and the use of English. And she's based out of Singapore. She's American, but a lot of her work is to sort of get people to understand that we actually judge people um, unconsciously according to their accent when they're speaking English, because
mhm,
the dominant culture or the dominant language is English in the business world, certainly. And yet, there's more people that speak many, many other languages than English. And so as a result, a lot of people have to kind of adapt and learn English, and it's not their first language, and they have an accent, and they're judged on that. And so her kind of mission was to show, no, we want those accents, we want that diversity, because that actually shows who you are. You're kind of repressing something about your culture and who you are, and it's just remembering that, because I feel like in this day and age in particular, it's really helpful to kind of think about yourself and where you come from, and what that story is. And in our workshops, we ask people to do that very explicitly. We'll ask them to go to a moment in their heritage, their grandparents, and tell those stories. And what that does to people is that they become really aware of where they've come from and how far people have had to travel just for them to be here in this world. My grandparents had to go through the war, had to go through this and
mhm,
that, and travel and, immigrate and all these things. And now here I am, reaping the benefits of essentially the struggles that they had to go through. And when you start to remember those things, you remember that that's actually part of you. That's part of your culture. And I think it's really hugely important work what Dean is doing and what he does in organizations in particular, so that people can understand each other better, collaborate better, be more productive together, rather than at odds, and constantly saying, well, that's not my culture, that's a different culture, it's never going to work. Whereas
mhm.
actually, no, the more you become aware of what makes people tick and where they come from, the more beneficial it is for everyone.
And I think what you described, being a little bit on the outside, you're here, you had two parents from two different countries, but had to learn from it. Same thing with myself. My father was born here, is first generation. My mother immigrated here.
Hmm.
Polish family, Polish parents, who when they individually moved to France, there wasn't Google to say, by the way, the name you chose her daughter is a cooking term in France. So you might have wanted to kept the Juliana, but it left me with some interesting material to explain even as a kid. But the cultural understanding about what informs your experience, how you see things, coming in as first generation to a country is totally different than when you've been embedded in the nation for many, many years. But
Hmm.
being curious and asking questions is the best way to learn and
Yeah.
be a student and not assume that we know all the answers. And we can get out of our way a little bit. That would really be helpful a lot of times in most situations, and myself included. I'm not saying I have it all right.
No, exactly, and I think that's kind of what was made evident to me after that interview, or during that interview, was like how much I don't know, and again, kind of, yeah, that hunger for that, or that curiosity of like, so who are you really, and like where are you from? I
Hmm.
think those are the questions that we kind of gloss over, especially in a very technology oriented culture, where we do these meetings on Zoom, and we get to the point, and we get things done for the sake of efficiency, but we're losing a little bit the human touch of understanding who someone is, and especially when there are moments that are not easy or difficult to go through, that's when you notice, oh, I need to know these people better that work for me.
Correct.
Because when everything's going okay, you can sort of say, oh, well, I guess everything's fine, so I don't really need to look at that. But actually, you need to do that even more, because it's just so important to kind of get everyone on the same page, but without glossing over those cultural values that people have that will necessarily make them think a little bit differently than you.
Mhm.
So that's our call to action today. Go
Yeah.
and know thy neighbor, know yourself as
Yes.
well.
And my other experience, just spend time to save time in the end. So that little
Yeah.
bit of investment will
Mm.
reap huge benefits.
Yeah. And I'll just say, the best way to get started with that is to ask people to tell you a story. Tell you a story about where they're from, who they are, who their grandparents were, and that sort of thing. And again, if you need any kind of support on that, we're here to help. We've
Yes.
helped thousands of people at this point, so always happy to listen to you. And so I just want to thank you, Julienne, once again for being my wonderful co-host, and
Thank you.
and thank you all listeners for being here. And again, if you want to learn more about what we do in this podcast and make sure you get all the episodes, you can go to narrative.com/podcasts. But then on the entire website, you'll find lots of resources and information, as well as a contact form. And I encourage you to use that. Even if your question isn't super clear yet, you can use it as stream of consciousness, and we will get back to you. I promise
Yeah.
you that.
I need help is usually a good starter
Yeah, there
phrase.
you go. I need help. Exactly. All right. Well, with that, thanks so much again, and we will see you next time. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
For more information on the narrative listening and storytelling method and how it can help your business, go to narrative.com.